My stuffing was like cardboard. That's what my daughter-in-law Jessica said into her cell phone while hiding in my bathroom. She thought I was just a nice old grandma who cooked all day for her family. She thought I couldn't hear her. She thought I was foolish. She thought she could laugh at my food in my house on Thanksgiving and nothing would happen. What she didn't know is that she wasn't just laughing at my stuffing. She was giving me the last push I needed to take back my life. She sat at my dinner table to eat. And I gave her a surprise so big and so perfectly planned that she will always remember how her own mean words came back to her. Before I tell you exactly how I turned my quiet home into my secret planning room, I have to ask, what country are you watching my story from? Tell me in the comments below. I love knowing how far my stories reach. My home has always been my happy place. It's a cozy house in a Denver neighborhood, the kind of street where the houses have front porches and everyone knows each other. My husband Robert and I bought it 35 years ago. We paid for it completely. We raised our son David in it. And after Robert died, I filled the empty spaces with my own daily habits. And no habit was more special than Thanksgiving. For me, Thanksgiving isn't just dinner, it's something I plan and dream about. It's the one day each year I get to use every bowl, every spoon, every recipe I learned over many years. You see, before I was a mom or Margaret the grandma, I was a cook. Robert and I owned a small restaurant near the mountains called Margaret's Kitchen. We were famous for our apple crisps and our homemade soups. We sold it when Robert got very sick and I never thought about it again. Not really. But my hands still remember how to cook. So on Thanksgiving morning I was doing what I loved most. I'd been awake since dawn. The 20-pound turkey was already turning golden brown in the oven. The smell of thyme, butter, and slow-cooked celery filled every room of the house. The desserts were sitting on the cooling racks. Apple pie, cherry pie, and my special recipe, caramel walnut tart. The mashed potatoes were ready. The corn casserole was prepared. I was happy. I was tired, yes, but it was the good kind of tired. The kind that comes from making something beautiful to share. That happy feeling lasted until exactly noon. I heard the front door open, a rush of cold Colorado air coming inside, followed by their voices. My son David and his wife Jessica. "We made it," David shouted. His voice a little too cheerful, like he was trying too hard to sound excited. I wiped my hands on my kitchen towel and went to say hello. David gave me a quick side hug, already looking toward the living room at the football game on TV. "Wow, it smells really good, Mom." "Hi, Margaret," Jessica said. She didn't try to hug me. She just stood near the door holding one fancy bottle of sparkling water. Her eyes looked around the room, and I could see the tiny curl of her mouth, like she was judging everything. Jessica has been my daughter-in-law for 5 years, and in all that time, she has never once looked at me with real kindness. She's a food influencer, or that's what she calls herself. It means she takes pictures of fancy restaurant meals and puts them online with words I don't understand. To Jessica, I am not a real person. I am something old and outdated. I am the embarrassing before picture. "Hello, Jessica." "Hello, David. I'm so happy you're here. Can I get you anything to drink?" "We're okay," Jessica said, walking right past me into the kitchen. I followed, my stomach feeling tight. This was her moment to take over. She stood in front of my oven, looking through the glass door at my turkey. "That's quite a large bird." 20 pounds, I said with pride. "It's an organic turkey from the farmer's market." She then looked over at my counter where my grandmother's old cast iron roasting pan was sitting. The one I'd taken the turkey out of earlier to add more butter. It's a heavy dark pan with little scratches from years of use. It was my grandmother's. "Oh, Margaret," she sighed dramatically, pointing at it. "You still cook with that ancient thing." I felt that familiar hot feeling inside me. I held the wooden spoon tighter in my hand. "It was my grandmother's," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It cooks the turkey perfectly every single time. It's just," she laughed, a tiny mean sound. "They have new ones now with timers and special coatings. You wouldn't have to work so hard, you know." The message was clear in the air, thick like the smell of gravy cooking. "You're old. You're doing everything wrong. You're failing at this." I've learned over the years that when I respond to Jessica's mean comments, I become the bad person. So I tried to be polite but firm. Jessica, I said, turning to look right at her. Pan works just fine. The food is what's important. Please, let's just have a nice day. It's Thanksgiving. She immediately made her hurt face. She looked over at David, who had just walked into the kitchen, and rolled her eyes as if to say, "Look what I have to deal with here. I was just trying to be helpful," she whispered to him loudly enough for me to definitely hear. David, my son, who I taught to read and helped with his homework every night, looked at me with that exhausted, begging look. "Mom, she's just giving advice. Don't take everything so personally." Personally. That's the word they always use to shut you up. When you stand up for yourself, you are too personal. When you ask for respect, you are being dramatic. "I'm not taking anything personally, David," I said quietly. "I'm just asking for a little respect in my own kitchen." "Oh, good grief," Jessica snapped, her fake nice act dropping completely. "Just a cooking pan. I'm gonna go watch the game." She walked out, leaving me and David standing in the kitchen. He wouldn't look at me. He just walked to the refrigerator, grabbed a soda, and said, "She's just tired from the long drive, Mom. Just ignore it, okay? For me." He followed her out, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I stood there for a full minute while the timer for the turkey beeped in the background. The happiness of the morning was completely gone, replaced by the familiar bitter taste of hurt. I had 2 full days of work cleaning up after a meal they didn't care about for a woman who hated me and a son who wouldn't stand up for me. I took a long, slow breath, turned off the timer, and put the turkey back in to cook more. I had a very, very long day ahead of me, and I had no clue that the worst part was still coming. The dinner bell rang at 3 o'clock. I've always believed that how you set a table shows how you feel about your guests. I'd ironed my nicest tablecloth, the one with tiny flowers that Robert's aunt gave us as a wedding gift. I used the fancy dishes, the good silverware, and the crystal water glasses that sparkle in the light. The table looked amazing. The turkey was cut into slices, golden and moist, sitting on the big serving plate. The mashed potatoes were in their bowl with steam rising up. The gravy was smooth and brown, the stuffing, the sweet potatoes, the green beans. It was a beautiful feast. It was my gift to them. I sat at the end of the table. David sat on my right side, Jessica on my left. "Well," I said, trying to bring back the happy mood. "Everything turned out wonderfully. David, would you like to say a prayer?" David cleared his throat, said a fast, "Thanks for the food, amen," and immediately started grabbing turkey. "Mom, this looks amazing," he said, piling food onto his plate. He was trying in his own weak way. Jessica, however, did not reach for any food. She simply sat there watching David load up his plate. Then, with a little dramatic sigh, she reached for the small insulated lunch bag she had set by her feet. "What's that, babe?" David asked, his mouth already stuffed with food. "Oh, it's nothing," Jessica said, unzipping the bag. "I just brought a little something for myself. I wasn't sure what the meal would be like." She pulled out a clear plastic container. Inside was a sad, wilted pile of raw spinach with some tiny seeds sprinkled on top. "I brought my spinach and chia seed bowl with lemon juice," she announced to everyone at the table, just in case anyone else wanted something, healthier. I stared at her container. All the warmth left my body. "Healthier," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Lighter," she corrected, though that didn't make it any better. "All this heavy old-fashioned food. It's just so much butter and salt. Can't eat like that anymore. It's terrible for your body." She put a tiny amount of her gray-green pile onto her fancy china plate. The difference between her food and mine was shocking. Hers looked like rabbit food. Mine looked like Thanksgiving. I looked at David, waiting, hoping with all my heart for him to say something, to say, "Jessica, that's so rude. My mother just spent 2 days cooking." He just stared down at his plate. He picked up his fork and took a huge bite of mashed potatoes. "Well, more turkey for me then," he mumbled with his mouth full. And that was it. That was all the support I was going to get. The rest of the meal was like a concert of disrespect, played by Jessica with my son as her silent helper. While David and I ate, Jessica spent the whole time on her phone. Her fork would sometimes touch her pile of spinach, but her eyes were glued entirely to the bright screen in her hand. Tap 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 swipe. She held the phone up level with the table. For one terrible second, I thought she was taking a picture of my food. "What are you doing, Jessica?" I asked, my patience completely worn out. "Working," she said, not even looking up. "I have to post about the holiday. My followers expect it. I'm just showing them, the aesthetic." She typed something with a small smug smile on her face. The aesthetic. I looked at my beautiful table, now feeling like a stage prop in her fake online show. I tried to save the conversation. I turned to my son. "David, how is that big project at work? The one you were stressed about last month?" David swallowed his food. "It's fine, Mom. We're managing." "It's a complete mess," Jessica interrupted, her eyes still on her phone. "His manager is incompetent. Brad doesn't know the first thing about leading people. We're probably going to have to cancel our ski trip to Vail in February." I blinked in confusion. "Vail?" "Yes, Margaret," she said, finally looking at me like I was a small child. "It's in Colorado. Skiing. We were planning 2 weeks there, but now because of his useless manager," she continued, but I stopped listening. She had taken over the conversation, made it all about herself, and complained about an expensive vacation all at the same time. David just sat there letting her speak for him, letting her put him down, and by doing that putting me down too. I felt invisible. I felt like a servant, a hired cook in my own home. The sound of forks on plates stopped. David pushed his empty plate back. Jessica's plate still had almost all of her spinach on it and nothing else. She hadn't taken even one bite of my food. Not the turkey, not the potatoes, not even one green bean. "Well," I said, my voice sounding strained and thin, "I suppose it's time for dessert." I stood up, my knees making cracking sounds. I started to pick up the plates, leaving Jessica's untouched spinach right where it was. I carried the heavy dishes into the kitchen, my arms hurting, but not nearly as much as my heart. I was scraping an entire plate of uneaten food into the trash can when I realized the house had gone completely silent. Too silent. And then from the hallway I heard it. A whisper and a mean laugh. I brought the plates from the table, my hands moving automatically. I walked back and forth from the dining room to the kitchen, the sound of dishes clanking too loudly in the quiet house. David had disappeared into the living room, probably to fall asleep watching the football game. I was alone. I scraped plate after plate of my hard work into the garbage. I felt that familiar Thanksgiving pain, the one that starts in your feet and climbs up your back. I was exhausted. I was so exhausted. All that was left was dessert. My famous caramel walnut tart. It was my masterpiece. The recipe that had won first place at the county fair. It was the one thing even Jessica usually pretended to enjoy. I went to the storage closet, which is a small room just past the kitchen, to get the special dessert platter. The door was open just a crack. As I reached for the platter on the middle shelf, I heard Jessica's voice. It wasn't coming from the living room. It was coming from the other side of the closet wall in the front hallway. She must have stepped outside to make a phone call. She was speaking in a quiet, gossipy whisper, the kind of voice you use when you're sharing something mean about someone else. And she was laughing. "Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe this place," Jessica whispered. I stopped moving, my hand frozen in the air reaching for the platter. It's like a time machine to 1985. Everything is just brown and boring. I don't know how he ate 2 full plates of it. My blood turned ice cold. "No, I'm serious," she continued, her voice full of fake sympathy. "The stuffing tasted like wet cardboard. I'm not joking." I took one tiny bite to be polite, and I'm pretty sure I'll need to brush my teeth 3 times to get rid of the taste. I'm literally starving right now. A small, sharp gasp escaped from my mouth. I put my hand over my lips quickly. Cardboard. I know, right? You know. I actually ate my meal in the car before we got here. I told her I was eating light and healthy. She doesn't understand. She thinks she's some kind of amazing chef, but honestly, it's just pathetic. Pathetic. She was painting a picture of me as a sad old woman, confused and failing in her own kitchen. Yeah, David is already passed out on her couch, she laughed meanly. He'll be knocked out for hours from all that heavy food. We'll probably leave soon. I told him we absolutely need to stop at that new gourmet burger place on the way home. I'm desperate for real food. And that was it. That was the moment the pain disappeared. It was such a stupid, careless lie. A lie that showed everything. The gourmet burger place, the trendy restaurant she was talking about. I knew exactly which one she meant. Had closed down 3 months ago. It went out of business. There wasn't any gourmet burger place to stop at. The closest fancy burger restaurant was in Boulder, almost an hour in the opposite direction from their house. She wasn't just being cruel. She was performing. She was lying to whoever was on that phone, trying to sound cool and sophisticated and better than me. She was making fun of my food, my home, my entire life. All as part of a little show to make herself look good. The betrayal wasn't just that she hated my cooking. The betrayal was that her meanness was so casual, so deep, that she would make up a complete lie to mock me even better. I heard her say a quick, "Okay, gotta run. She might notice I'm gone. Talk later." The call ended with a click. I heard her footsteps on the wood floor as she walked back toward the living room. I stood perfectly still in the dark storage closet. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. In fact, for the first time in many years, I felt a calmness I can only describe as perfect ice-cold clarity. The pain was completely gone. The hurt, the feeling of being invisible, the anger, it all disappeared. And in its place, something new, something hard and clear like a block of ice. It was determination. Jessica was right about one thing. It was pathetic. It was pathetic that I had wasted years of my skill, my effort, and my best recipes on someone so small and mean. I stood there for another 10 seconds. I thought about the cardboard stuffing comment. I thought about my grandmother's cooking pan. I thought about the gourmet burger place lie. Then I took a very slow, very deep breath. I picked up the heavy glass platter. I walked out of the storage closet, my back perfectly straight, my head held high. I went to the counter, took a knife, and cut one perfect, careful slice of my caramel walnut tart. I placed it on a small dessert plate. I walked into the living room. Jessica was on the couch looking at her phone. David was already snoring quietly in the recliner chair. "Jessica," I said. She looked up, seeming annoyed that I interrupted her. "I saved you a slice of dessert," I said, my voice as smooth as honey. I held the plate out toward her. She looked at me, then at the tart, and a look of forced politeness appeared on her face. "Oh, thank you, Margaret," she said, taking the plate from my hands. "Looks really nice." I watched her carefully. I watched her pick up the small dessert fork. I watched her take a tiny, hesitant bite. I watched her eyes get slightly bigger for just a moment when she realized how genuinely delicious it was. And then I watched her force a pained, fake smile. She said without any real feeling. "Lovely." I just nodded with a small, tight smile on my face. "I'm so glad you like it." I turned around and walked back to my kitchen. The old game was finished, and a completely new one was about to start. 1 hour later they were gone. The goodbye at the front door was short and cold. "Thanks for everything, Mom," David said, giving me another one of his weak, distracted hugs. He was already thinking about the drive home, the game he would watch later, the nap he would take. "Thank you, Margaret," Jessica said, pulling her expensive coat on tight. Her voice was bright and fake. "The tart was really quite special." "You're very welcome, Jessica," I replied. My voice was perfectly calm and flat. I didn't smile at all. I just looked directly at her. "I'm glad you had a chance to taste it." She held my stare for just a second, and I saw a tiny flicker of something. Confusion, maybe? Did she sense the coldness in my tone? Well, she was too focused on herself. She decided I was just tired from cooking all day. She smiled, satisfied that her performance as the polite guest was complete. They walked to their car and I closed the front door behind them. I turned the lock. The sound of the lock clicking into place was the loudest sound in the entire house. I rested my forehead against the cool painted wood of the door for a moment. Silence. The house was empty. But it wasn't the sad, lonely silence I sometimes felt after they left. It was a different kind. It was the silence of holding your breath. The silence of a room where a big decision has just been made. I turned around and looked at the mess. The dining room was a disaster. Plates covered with dried gravy, crumpled napkins everywhere, water glasses with rings on the table. In the living room, the recliner cushion still had the dent where David had been sleeping. And in the kitchen, sitting on the counter, was the slice of caramel tart, the one I had given to Jessica. She had taken maybe 2 polite bites to be nice. The rest of it just sat there making fun of my best work. I walked over to it slowly. I picked up the small dessert fork. I looked at the tart, the beautiful tart, the tart she had eaten just moments after calling me pathetic and sad. I felt the pain then. It was a sharp, physical sting right under my ribs. It wasn't just the insult. It was years and years of it. The constant tiny cuts, the hints that I was old, unimportant, foolish, that my skills, my traditions, my love meant absolutely nothing. It was realizing that my son, my only child, would sit there and watch it all happen. That he would choose his wife's casual cruelty over his own mother's dignity. Cardboard. Time machine to 1985. The gourmet burger place. That ridiculous, stupid, impossible lie. I almost laughed out loud. It was that lie that freed me. If she had simply said, "It's not my style of cooking," I might have spent the rest of my life wondering if maybe my recipes were getting worse. But the gourmet burger place wasn't a criticism of my food. It was pure contempt. It was proof that her opinion had absolutely nothing to do with my cooking and everything to do with her own problems and insecurities. And in that exact moment, the pain stopped completely. It didn't slowly fade away. Stopped like flipping a light switch. The sharp, burning sting of betrayal was instantly replaced by a cold, heavy calmness. It was the calm that comes from acceptance. I was not a victim anymore. I had been volunteering for this treatment. And I was officially quitting. I picked up Jessica's plate. I walked to the kitchen trash can. I scraped the rest of my award-winning first-place tart into the garbage. Felt absolutely wonderful. I spent the next 3 hours cleaning my home, but I wasn't just cleaning. I was erasing. I was taking back my space. I washed the fancy dishes by hand, my movements careful and deliberate. With every plate I dried, I felt a layer of resentment wash away and disappear. I scrubbed my grandmother's cast iron pan, the one Jessica had mocked so meanly. "You still cook with that ancient thing." I ran my thumb over the smooth, heavy iron. This pan had cooked holiday meals for 60 Thanksgivings. It had fed 5 generations of my family. It had survived wars and moves and losses. Had real value. It wasn't ancient. It was timeless and precious. I dried it carefully, rubbed it with oil until it gleamed, and hung it back in its proper spot on the wall. I put the last of the crystal glasses away in the cabinet. The kitchen was completely spotless. It was no longer a place where bad things had happened. It was mine again, fully and completely. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat down at my small kitchen table. I looked at my hands resting on the smooth wooden surface. These were not the hands of a sad, pathetic old woman. These were the hands of an expert. Hands that could mix and measure and create beautiful things. The old Margaret, the one who stayed quiet and forced herself to smile to keep everyone happy, she was gone forever. She had died in that storage closet listening to a lie about a burger restaurant. The woman sitting at this table now was someone completely different. She was the woman who had run Margaret's kitchen, the woman who had balanced the books, who had worked with food suppliers, who knew the exact cost and profit on every bowl of soup and every slice of pie. I had been hiding that woman for 15 years, trying to be the soft, easy-to-please mother and grandmother. Not anymore. Never again. I thought about Christmas. Every single year it was the same predictable routine. They would arrive on Christmas Eve, spend the night in the guest room, and expect a prime rib feast on Christmas Day with all the fancy sides and homemade rolls. I picked up my phone from the counter. I opened my calendar app. I scrolled to December 24th. My thumb hovered over the entry that said, "David and Jessica arrive. Guest room ready. I pressed the delete button. A small, genuine smile touched the corners of my mouth. It was the first real smile I'd had all day. I would not be used like this ever again. My time, my skill, and my home were no longer theirs to take for granted and mock. The transformation was complete. It was quiet, happened inside me, and it was absolute and final. I was done being their free cook and maid. I looked around my kitchen, at my professional quality stand mixer, at my double oven that I'd saved up for years to buy. This was not just a kitchen. This was a tool. This was a workshop. And I knew exactly what I was going to build with it. The silence of the house felt like medicine. The days after Thanksgiving were peaceful. I didn't get an apology phone call from David. I didn't get a text message from Jessica saying sorry. I didn't expect one at all. Their silence was just more proof of who they really were. On Saturday morning I took my tea, and I didn't go sit in the living room like usual. I went upstairs to the attic. It's dusty up there, smelling like old paper and cardboard boxes. In the far corner, hidden under an old bedsheet, was a dark brown storage tea. The one I'd packed away 15 years ago when I decided to become a full-time stay-at-home mom, and later when I took care of Robert during his illness. I lifted the heavy lid with both hands. Inside, sitting on top of folded aprons and old kitchen towels, was my past. It wasn't a shoebox full of recipe cards written on index paper. It was a stack of thick, professional notebooks with hard covers. I ran my fingers over the faded gold letters printed on the front cover. Margaret's Kitchen, Recipes and Costs. Opened the first one. It was not Grandma's casual home cooking. It was science. Exact professional recipes written like formulas. Chicken noodle soup. 2 quarts water, 1 pound chicken, 8 ounces egg noodles, 4 ounces carrots. Everything measured by weight, with the cost per serving written in my own clear, neat handwriting. Lists of wholesale suppliers with phone numbers. This was not a hobby I did for fun. This was a real business, and it had been successful. Under the notebooks was a yellow legal folder. I pulled it out carefully. Business registration papers. Margaret's Kitchen, LLC. And underneath that, the legal documents from when we sold the business. I sat down on the dusty attic floor and read through them slowly. My memory was exactly right. We had sold the lease on the restaurant building near the mountains. We had sold the industrial-size ovens, the commercial mixers, all the big equipment. But the name, the brand, the recipes, the reputation, I had kept ownership of all of it. The young couple who bought the lease wanted to open a coffee and smoothie shop. They had zero interest in my traditional home-style meals. The name Margaret's Kitchen had no value to them at all, so I had simply kept it for myself. It sat unused and forgotten, a sleeping treasure. I felt a smile spread slowly across my face. It was not a warm, friendly smile. It was a private, satisfied smile, like I just discovered a secret weapon. As if the universe was listening, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Pulled it out. The screen said, "David calling." I stared at the phone for a long moment, my thumb running over the embossed gold letters on the notebook cover. I let it ring 2 more full times. Then I answered calmly. "Hello, David. Just calling to check in." His voice sounded uncertain and careful. He was testing to see how I would react. "You seemed, I don't know, kind of distant on Thursday." This was it. This was the moment where I was supposed to say, I was really hurt by what happened. And he was supposed to say, Jessica didn't mean anything by it. And I was supposed to say, it's okay, I forgive you. And the whole cycle would start all over again. I decided not to play along. "I'm perfectly fine, David. Just very busy." My voice was polite, pleasant, and as distant as the moon in the sky. "Hey, that's good." There was an awkward, uncomfortable pause. He was confused. I wasn't following the usual script. "So, are we still on for Christmas?" Jessica was asking what she should, pack to wear for the prime rib dinner. I took a slow, calming breath. I looked down at the legal papers in my lap. "Actually, David, I will not be hosting Christmas this year." Complete silence. A long, buzzing silence on the other end of the phone line. What do you mean? We always have Christmas at your house, Mom. I know we do, I said, keeping my voice light and calm. But I've decided to make different plans this year. I'm afraid you and Jessica will need to figure out your own holiday arrangements. Different plans. What different plans? Mom, are you angry at us? This isn't about being angry, David. This is simply about me making a different choice for myself. I'm sure you two are capable adults who can manage your own holiday. Now I really do have to go. I have several important phone calls I need to make. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Hung up the phone. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't give him a chance to argue with me or to put Jessica on the phone to guilt-trip me. I just ended the call cleanly. My heart was beating fast in my chest. But I wasn't scared or anxious. I was energized. I was wide awake for the first time in years. I walked back downstairs, the legal folder held carefully in my hands. I sat down at my desktop computer and opened the internet browser. I knew exactly what I was looking for. I typed into the search bar, Denver Children's Hospital Winter Charity Event. It was the biggest event of the season in our city. The one that every social climber and important person in Denver was desperate to attend. The one that Jessica had complained about not being able to get tickets to last year because they sold out so fast. I scrolled down the event page carefully. I saw the list of corporate sponsors and donors. And then I saw the planning committee listed there. Third name on the list. Linda Morrison. Linda. We had been in the same book club 20 years ago. We'd lost touch over the years like people naturally do. But I knew she had become very involved in charity work and fundraising. I picked up my phone and searched for her number in my old contact list. I found it and dialed. She answered on the third ring. Margaret Thompson. Is that really you? Oh my goodness, it's been forever. We talked for several minutes, catching up easily. The comfortable rhythm of an old friendship coming right back. I asked about her grandchildren. She asked about my house and how I was doing. Linda, I said, getting to the real point of my call. I see you're on the planning committee for the winter charity event. Oh Lord, don't even remind me, she laughed tiredly. It's been an absolute nightmare this year. But yes, I'm the co-chair with Thomas Bradley. I'd like to make a donation, I said carefully. For the silent auction. I was thinking maybe a custom dessert package. Perhaps a year's worth of pies, delivered once each month to the winning bidder. Linda was quiet for a moment on the other end. Then she let out a long, tired sigh. Margaret, that's incredibly kind and generous of you, but to be completely honest, we have a much bigger problem right now than the silent auction. My fingers tightened on the legal folder in front of me. Tell me more. Our main dessert caterer, the pastry chef from the Grand Hotel downtown. He just backed out yesterday. His entire kitchen staff came down with food poisoning. The event is in 3 weeks, Margaret. I have 300 guests coming, including the mayor and the governor. And I have absolutely no dessert course. I'm going to end up serving them. I don't even know. Store-bought cookies on paper plates. It's a complete disaster. I looked down at my notebook. I looked around at my kitchen with its double ovens and professional mixer. The old Margaret would have said, "Oh, Linda, that's just terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that." The new Margaret spoke up clearly and confidently. "Linda," I said, and my voice changed completely. It was no longer the voice of a retired grandmother. It was the voice of a business owner. What if I told you I could solve your problem? Solve what? The auction donation. No, I said firmly. The entire dessert course for all 300 guests. Linda made a choking sound. Margaret, that's 300 plated desserts for a formal sit-down dinner. This isn't a church bake sale or a potluck. This is a black tie event with very important people. We need someone with professional experience and a commercial kitchen. I am a professional, I said, and the words felt as strong as steel. Or I was one. I used to run a restaurant in the mountains near Vail. You might remember it, Margaret's Kitchen. We were open for 12 years. Hey, I do remember that place. Oh my goodness, Margaret. Your apple crisp. People drove an hour just for that. Can do this, Linda. And I'll do it at cost. I'll donate my time and my recipes to the hospital charity. Ooh, you would do that? She sounded like she was about to cry with relief and gratitude. On one condition, I said firmly. Anything. Name it. Whatever you need. I don't want to be listed in the program as just Margaret Thompson, a nice lady who bakes. I'm not doing this as a favor from a grandmother. This is a business decision and a business relaunch. I want to be listed in the printed program and announced from the stage using my business name, Margaret's Kitchen. I want to reintroduce my brand to the sea. Linda was completely silent for a long moment. I could practically hear her mind working through what I was asking. Margaret Thompson, she said slowly, with a new tone of respect in her voice. You are absolutely brilliant. I love it. You have yourself a deal. Margaret's Kitchen is officially our dessert sponsor for the 2024 winter charity event. I hung up the phone carefully. I looked around my kitchen with completely new eyes. It was no longer just a kitchen where I cooked family meals. It was a production facility, and I had exactly 3 weeks to prepare. My home transformed completely almost overnight. My cozy, comfortable kitchen became a serious, high-volume bakery workspace. The first thing I did was move my small breakfast table out of the kitchen and into the spare bedroom. I needed every inch of space I could get. I went online and rented 2 important pieces of equipment. A tall metal shelving rack, the kind you see in restaurant kitchens for holding multiple sheet pans, and a small chest freezer, which the delivery men set up in my garage. This was not me being impulsive or careless. This was a carefully planned military operation. I sat down with my old business notebooks, a calculator, and a fresh legal pad. 300 individual plated desserts. My caramel walnut tartlets. They couldn't be too large because this was the final course after a big multi-course meal. 3 inches across would be perfect for each one. That meant I needed 300 individual hand-pressed butter pastry shells. That meant pounds and pounds of high-quality European butter. That meant gallons of heavy cream, bags of fresh walnuts, and of course the finest vanilla extract and real caramel I could find. I created a detailed production schedule on my notepad. Week 1. Make and freeze all 300 pastry shells. Week 2. Source all ingredients from suppliers. Make and freeze the caramel filling in batches. Week 3, day of the event. Toast walnuts fresh, assemble all tarts, add final glaze, garnish each one, pack carefully, and deliver on time. I didn't have time to feel angry anymore. I didn't have time to feel hurt or sorry for myself. I only had time to work hard. And oh, how I worked. My mornings started at 5 a.m. The house would be dark and cold at first, then slowly warm up as the ovens came to life and heated the kitchen. I worked in careful batches of 50 shells at a time. The steady rhythmic sound of the rolling pin on dough, the smell of butter and flour filling the air, the precise repetitive motion of pressing the dough into the small tart tins. It was like meditation. My hands, which Jessica probably thought were just old and wrinkled and useless, came alive with purpose. They were quick. They were sure. They remembered every single skill. My back ached at the end of each day. My feet were swollen and sore. And I had never ever been happier in my entire life. This was not the empty exhaustion I felt after Thanksgiving. This was the deep, satisfying tiredness that comes from having a real purpose. I wasn't cooking to fulfill some obligation to ungrateful people. I was building something important, 1 3-inch tart shell at a time. By the end of week 1, the chest freezer in my garage held 300 absolutely perfect pale frozen pastry shells, each one carefully separated by a small square of wax paper so they wouldn't stick together. The phone rang several times during those weeks, of course. It was David. I answered it while wiping a streak of flour from my cheek. Hello. Mom, what is going on? I've been trying to call you for days. His voice was sharp and accusatory, almost angry. I've been extremely busy, David, I said calmly, checking the timer on my oven. Busy? You canceled Christmas. You're not returning calls. Jessica is. She's really upset now. She thinks this is all about that stupid cooking pan on Thanksgiving. I stopped what I was doing. I leaned against my kitchen counter and took a breath. Do you know what's interesting, David? I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm and even. You just said Jessica is upset. You just called my grandmother's pan stupid. But you have not once, not a single time, asked me how I am doing or how I am feeling. He was silent. I could hear his quick, shallow breathing on the other end. That's not fair. We always come to your house for holidays. It's what we do. It's tradition. It was a tradition, I corrected him gently but firmly. It was a tradition that I have now decided to end. I have a new commitment now, a new obligation. An obligation. What could possibly be more important than your own family? What's more important than Christmas with your son? I looked around my kitchen, at the metal shelving rack waiting to be filled, at the boxes of butter and bags of walnuts stacked neatly on my dining room floor. My work, I said simply. The silence that followed was total and complete. He didn't understand at all. The idea of me, his mother, having work, having a career, was so completely foreign to him that he literally couldn't process what I was saying. What? Your work? What are you even talking about, Mo? I'm afraid I really do have to go now, David. I'm on a deadline. I have a contract to fulfill for the Children's Hospital Winter Charity event. I am the official dessert sponsor this year. I'm relaunching Margaret's Kitchen as a catering business. I don't think he had ever in his entire life heard that tone of voice from me. It wasn't Mom. It was CEO. Wait. Please I'll talk to you after the event is over, dear, I said calmly. I'll be far too busy until then to have long conversations. Take care of yourself. Goodbye. Hung up. I put my phone on silent mode and placed it in a kitchen drawer where I wouldn't be tempted to look at it. The final 2 weeks were an absolute blur of logistics and planning. I drove to my old supplier, the wholesale restaurant supply warehouse on the industrial side of the city. I walked in through the glass doors, and the man behind the counter, who I'd known for 30 years, did a visible double-take. Margaret Thompson. I'll be damned. Thought you'd hung up your apron for good. Not quite, Jim, I smiled at him warmly. I need 15 pounds of imported French butter, 8 pounds of fresh walnut halves, and 4 gallons of heavy whipping cream, please. He looked down at my handwritten list and let out a low whistle. That's one hell of a comeback order, Margaret. Really good to see you back in action. The day of the charity event finally arrived. It was a freezing cold December evening with snow falling lightly. I had rented a small refrigerated van for the day. My kitchen became a precise assembly line. I toasted the walnuts in small batches, filling the entire house with their rich, nutty smell. I made the caramel glaze and carefully brushed each tart until it gleamed and shined like a precious jewel. One perfect candied walnut piece on top of each one. I was not wearing my regular clothes or my apron. I was wearing my old, crisp white chef's coat from the restaurant days. I carefully loaded the tall metal rack with all 300 tarts arranged perfectly on sheet pans. I rolled the heavy rack out to the van, secured it so nothing would move during the drive, and headed out. I drove not to the fancy front entrance of the Grand Hotel, but to the back, to the loading dock, to the service entrance where deliveries are made. I walked into the massive, loud, steaming hotel kitchen. There were shouts in different languages, the clanging of metal pans, chefs in tall white hats running everywhere. The executive chef, a serious-looking woman with sharp eyes and a French accent, spotted me immediately. She walked over and looked at my single rolling rack with obvious suspicion and doubt. You are the... How do you say? Margaret's Kitchen. I am, I said, standing up straight and meeting her eyes. She walked closer. She examined the tarts carefully, looking at them from different angles. She studied the perfect crimp on the edges. She noted the high-gloss shine of the caramel. She took a small spoon from her coat pocket and, without asking permission, scooped a tiny bit from the side of one tart. She brought it to her mouth. She tasted it carefully. She closed her eyes. She opened them again and looked directly at me. The suspicion and doubt were completely gone from her face. They were replaced by something I hadn't seen in 15 years, but I recognized it immediately and it made my heart soar. Respect. Madam, she said with a short, professional nod. Très bien. Very good. Welcome. My team will plate these at exactly 8 p.m. Thank you, chef, I said, returning her nod. My work in this kitchen was done. I left the rack in her capable hands, walked back out through the service entrance, and got back into my van. But I wasn't going home. Not yet. I drove around to the front of the hotel, handed my keys to the young valet, and walked into the grand, sparkling lobby. In my van, I had packed a small black garment bag. In the ladies' restroom near the lobby, I changed out of my professional chef's coat and into a floor-length emerald green silk gown that I hadn't worn in years. I put on my pearl necklace, the one Robert gave me on our 25th anniversary. I had a ticket to the event. My friend Linda had made absolutely sure I was seated at her table, right up front near the stage. My plan was complete. I had delivered the product as the chef. Now I was going to watch them serve it as an honored guest. The grand ballroom of the hotel was absolutely magnificent. It was a completely different world from my quiet kitchen at home. The ceilings were at least 40 feet high, covered with glittering crystal chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls of light. A small orchestra was playing classical music in the corner. Hundreds of people in tuxedos and beautiful gowns were mingling and talking, their voices and laughter filling the huge space. The air smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flower. This was the exact world that Jessica was so desperate to be part of, to be seen in, to be photographed in. Because I was with Linda, who was co-chair of the entire event, I was not treated like just another guest. I was welcomed like someone important. Margaret, you simply must meet some people, Linda said, taking my arm gently and pulling me into a small circle of well-dressed people standing near the bar. Margaret, this is Dr. Patterson, the hospital president, and this is Mr. and Mrs. Chen from the Chen Family Foundation. I shook their hands firmly, looking each of them in the eye. It's a pleasure to meet you all, I said. Linda tells us you are our absolute hero tonight, Dr. Patterson said, his eyes warm and kind. The entire planning committee was in a state of panic. We are so very grateful to you, Ms. Thompson. I was just happy I could help the hospital, I said sincerely. Nonsense, Mrs. Chen said with a warm smile. I remember Margaret's kitchen very well. My husband and I used to drive up to the mountains every Sunday morning just for your cinnamon rolls and coffee. It's truly an honor to have you here tonight. I was seen. In this room absolutely full of the city's most powerful and wealthy people, I was seen and respected. I was not invisible. I was not just Mom. I was not the old lady. I was Ms. Thompson, a respected professional and business owner. We were seated at table number 2, right next to the stage in the very front. I was sitting between Linda and the hospital president. I had a clear, perfect view of the entire massive room. And that's when I saw them. They were standing near the back entrance by the crowded bar area. Jessica was wearing a tight gold sequin dress that was far too flashy and looked very expensive. She was scanning the huge room with hungry, frantic eyes, like a shark looking for prey. Her phone was already in her hand, held up high as she took a sweeping video, no doubt for her online followers. David was beside her, looking deeply uncomfortable in every way. His rented tuxedo was pulling tight at the shoulders and he kept tugging at his bow tie like it was choking him. He looked like a man who had been forced against his will into a costume for a play he didn't want to be in. Jessica didn't even glance at him. She was on a mission. She grabbed his arm roughly and began pulling him through the crowd, heading straight toward a woman I recognized as a local news reporter. I watched her intercept the reporter with an aggressive approach, her smile wide and fake, her phone already positioned at the perfect angle for a selfie. The reporter looked mildly annoyed but posed politely for one quick photo. Jessica was practically vibrating with self-importance and fake confidence. This, I thought to myself, is what she truly values. Not real relationships, not family, just this performance, this desperate illusion of belonging and being important. I turned back to my own table. Dr. Patterson was telling a very funny story about a charity auction that went hilariously wrong 3 years ago. I laughed, a real, genuine, heartfelt laugh, and I didn't look back in Sarah and David's direction for the rest of the cocktail hour before dinner. The dinner service began right on schedule. The first 2 courses were served by the efficient waitstaff. A delicate butternut squash soup, a small arugula salad with pears. From my perfect vantage point at the front, I could see them clearly at their table in the very back of the room near the kitchen service doors, the cheapest seats in the house. Jessica was not enjoying herself at all. She wasn't talking to David. She was picking at her food with her fork, barely eating. She kept looking at her phone. Then she would look up, her eyes desperately scanning the room as if trying to will someone important to notice her and come talk to her. No one did. No one even looked her way. David was just eating steadily, dutifully, miserably cutting his chicken into small pieces. I felt a strange pang, not of pity, but of distant sadness. He had made his choice. He had chosen this hollow, anxious, expensive performance over a real family relationship, over his own mother. And then David looked up from his plate, his eyes drifting across the enormous room, bored, probably looking for the nearest exit or bathroom. His gaze passed over my table, stopped suddenly, and then snapped back like a rubber band. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. I saw the confusion spread across his face. He squinted hard. I could read his lips from across the room. "Mom!" He grabbed Jessica's arm urgently. "What?" she hissed, annoyed, pulling her arm away from him roughly. That's my mom. Right there." Sarah's head whipped around fast. She followed his gaze across the ballroom. "You saw me." Every drop of blood drained from her face instantly. Her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looked like a mask on white paper. She didn't just see me sitting there. She saw the emerald silk gown. She saw the pearl necklace. She saw me sitting at table 2, right in front of the stage. She saw me laughing comfortably with the president of the children's hospital. She saw me, the woman she had called pathetic and sad, sitting at the exact table she would have given anything in the world to be seated at. Her entire body went completely rigid and stiff. I saw her lean in close and hiss something at David urgently. "What is she doing here? How did she even get in? Did you know about this?" Mark just shook his head slowly, his face pale, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrible understanding. He was connecting the dots in his mind. The gala, the work I'd mentioned, the contract. This was my work. This was my contract. This was the panic I had wanted to see. The realization that they had no power here, no control. I had not come to them begging. I had not argued or yelled. I had simply and completely bypassed them. I had left them behind in every possible way. From across the enormous ballroom, our eyes met and locked. David's were wide and pleading, like a child who knows he's in trouble. Jessica's were narrow, filled with a confused, poisonous rage she couldn't hide. I didn't smile at them. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge them at all beyond a simple, steady gaze. Then I calmly turned back to Dr. Patterson at my table. "You were saying, doctor," I said pleasantly. And just as I did, the lights in the ballroom dimmed dramatically, and a single bright spotlight hit the podium on the stage. The orchestra music stopped. It was time for the speeches and announcements. It was time for dessert to be served. The ballroom fell into a respectful hush. A single bright white spotlight illuminated the podium like a star. Dr. Patterson stood up from our table, walked up the 3 steps to the stage, and tapped the microphone gently. The small sound echoed through the vast, silent room. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded calmly in my lap on the soft silk of my gown. I could feel, like a physical weight on my shoulders, the intense stare from David and Jessica's table in the back of the room. "Good evening, everyone," Dr. Patterson began, his voice warm and commanding. "I hope you are all having a wonderful evening so far." He spoke for several minutes, thanking the major corporate sponsors by name, thanking the hospital board members, and thanking the volunteer event committee. I saw Jessica stifle a yawn from across the room. She looked bored and agitated. This was just the boring part she had to sit through to get to the important photo opportunities. Now, Dr. Patterson continued, I have a little story I'd like to share with you all. As many of you know, putting on an event of this size and importance is a massive undertaking. And just 3 weeks ago, we faced what seemed like an impossible crisis. My heart gave a single hard thump in my chest. This was it. This was the moment. Our contracted dessert caterer, the head pastry team from this very hotel, had to withdraw at the absolute last minute due to a kitchen emergency. We were left with 300 guests, including many of you here tonight, and no final course for the meal. It was, to be completely honest, a disaster. As he spoke, a signal must have been given to the kitchen. The service doors on both sides of the ballroom swung open simultaneously, and a silent, perfectly coordinated team of waiters in crisp uniforms emerged, each one carrying large trays held high and steady. They spread out across the room like a choreographed dance, a model of perfect precision and timing. A small white plate was placed gently in front of me, and far in the back of the room, a plate was placed in front of Jessica. She looked down at it with casual disinterest. From where I sat, I could see the gleam of the caramel glaze catching the light from the chandeliers above. It was my caramel walnut tart. It was, I knew without any doubt, the single best thing I had ever learned to create in my entire life. Jessica looked at the small tart with immediate suspicion and judgment. It was small and simple looking. She was a food influencer. She was a critic. I could see her dismissing it before she'd even picked up her fork. She probably assumed it was some mass-produced hotel pastry, nothing special. She picked up her dessert fork reluctantly. At the podium on stage, Dr. Patterson continued his story. We were in what seemed like an impossible position. We had no options left, no backup plan. And then we received a phone call. A call from someone who is truly a Denver legend. Someone who decided to come out of a well-earned retirement, turn on her ovens, and personally create the masterpiece that each of you has in front of you right now at this very moment. Jessica took a bite of the tart. I watched her like a hawk. I didn't blink once. Her fork, which had been moving slowly and reluctantly, suddenly froze in mid-air. Her eyes went wide. It wasn't a polite, fake widening. It was a genuine, involuntary shock. I knew exactly, precisely what she was tasting in that moment. She was tasting the all-butter pastry crust, so perfectly flaky it dissolved instantly on her tongue. She was tasting the rich, smooth caramel filling made from real cream and real vanilla. She was tasting the toasted, caramelized walnuts with their deep, complex flavor. She was, in that single moment, tasting the absolute truth. This was not cardboard. This was not boring. This was not pathetic. This was genuine artistry, and somewhere deep inside she knew it. Her head snapped up fast, her face pale with a dawning, confused horror spreading across her features. Her eyes darted frantically to the printed program sitting on her table, which she hadn't bothered to read earlier. And at that exact second Dr. Patterson delivered the final, perfect line. Ladies and gentlemen, our hero. Please join me in giving a warm, grateful round of applause to our dessert sponsor for this evening, Margaret's Kitchen, and its founder, the incredible Ms. Margaret Thompson. The name hit her like a physical punch to the stomach. Ms. Margaret Thompson. A different spotlight, bright and white and impossible to miss, swung dramatically across the massive room. It left the stage and landed directly, perfectly on me. On me in my emerald silk gown at table 2 in the front row. Margaret, Dr. Patterson said, beaming at me with genuine warmth and gratitude. Would you please stand so everyone can see you? I stood up slowly and gracefully. The entire ballroom, all 300 of the most important and powerful people in the city, turned to look at me. And I heard the sound begin. It started at my table with Linda and Dr. Patterson and Mrs. Chen. And it spread like a wave from table to table across the room. Applause. Loud, sustained, genuine, heartfelt applause. I looked out at the sea of faces, all of them smiling, all of them clapping for me, for my work, for my comeback. My eyes scanned calmly across the room, over the heads of the donors and the doctors and the business leaders, to the darkness in the very back where David and Jessica sat, now illuminated by the dim ambient light. David looked like he'd been physically struck. He was staring at me with his mouth slightly open. His face was a mask of complete disbelief and something I hadn't seen in many, many years. But Jessica was frozen like a statue. Her face was chalk white. Her fork was still gripped in her hand. She was trapped. Everyone at her table was clapping enthusiastically. The people next to her were clapping. She was completely surrounded by my success, by my triumph. Slowly, like a robot with stiff joints, she was forced to put her fork down on her plate. She was forced to lift her hands. And she began to clap. Her movements were stiff and jerky. Her smile was a terrifying, frozen grimace. She was clapping for me. She was publicly applauding the woman she had mocked and called pathetic. She was celebrating in front of the entire city, the sad old lady who had just proven her to be completely wrong and foolish. This was not a confrontation or an argument. This was checkmate. I didn't smile at her. I didn't sneer or gloat. I simply held her gaze steadily from across the room for 3 long seconds. I gave a small, dignified nod to Dr. Patterson on the stage. Then I nodded graciously to the room, acknowledging their thanks. The power was mine. The applause was mine. The night was mine. And Jessica, in her expensive gold dress at her back row table, was forced to sit there with the taste of my victory literally in her mouth. The applause continued for a full minute. I stood in the warm, bright spotlight, the undisputed center of attention in the most important room in the entire city. I was no longer a shadow in my own kitchen. I was the main event, the star. When I finally sat back down, my table was instantly surrounded by people. "Ms. Thompson, that was absolutely genius," a man in an expensive tuxedo said enthusiastically, pressing a business card into my hand. "We have a corporate shareholders' dinner next month. We absolutely must talk." "Margaret, darling," another elegant woman gushed, touching my arm. "My daughter is getting married next June. We simply must discuss catering options." I smiled warmly, accepted every card. I made sincere promises to call them. I was gracious. I was professional. And I was, for the first time in 15 years, fully and unapologetically myself. Across the room, I watched the consequences begin to unfold like a slow-motion disaster. David and Jessica were completely isolated at their table. No one was speaking to them or acknowledging them. The people around them were all turned away, trying to get a better look at me in the front. They were utterly irrelevant. Jessica, I could see clearly, was desperately trying to salvage her night. She was on her phone, her fingers flying frantically across the screen, her face set in a rigid, forced smile. She was, I had absolutely no doubt, trying to spin this situation, trying to write some kind of social media post that said something like, "At the charity gala tonight. So proud of my amazing mother-in-law Margaret Thompson. Such an inspiration." But it was far too late for that. Her followers, the ones she was so desperate to impress, would only see one simple thing. She had been relegated to the back row, the cheap seats, while her pathetic old mother-in-law was the guest of honor in the front row. After about 15 minutes, they couldn't take it anymore. They didn't come over to say congratulations or goodbye. They couldn't. To walk across that ballroom floor would be a walk of shame, a public admission of their lowly status. I watched them stand up from their table. I watched them quietly gather their coats. I watched them slink out through the service door near their table in the back, the same door the waiters used to bring out the food. They were gone, disappeared into the night. The event ended late. I was one of the very last people to leave. I had promised Linda I would stay for a glass of champagne with the planning committee and take some photos for the hospital newsletter. When I finally got home around midnight, the house was completely dark and silent. My feet were throbbing in my heels. My kitchen was exactly as I'd left it that morning, clean and empty. But it was a triumphant silence, a victorious emptiness. I did not have to clean up after anyone. I did not have to scrape their unwanted food into the trash. I made myself a cup of herbal tea, sat down at my kitchen table, and began to carefully sort through the thick stack of business cards I had collected throughout the evening. The next morning, the real consequences and opportunities began. My phone started ringing at 9 a.m. It was the Denver Lifestyle magazine, the city's most popular lifestyle and food publication. They were writing a feature article about the charity event. "We're doing a piece called The 5 Best Moments from the Winter Charity Event," the young, enthusiastic editor said. "And honestly, Ms. Thompson, you and your dessert are #1 by a landslide. Can I get a quote from you for the article?" The article went live online that same afternoon. It called my tart a triumphant return to form from a forgotten Denver culinary legend. It mentioned Margaret's Kitchen 6 times throughout the article. My phone did not stop ringing for the rest of the day. It was Linda calling and practically screaming with excitement and joy. It was the man from the shareholders' dinner calling to book me officially. It was the woman with the June wedding. It was 2 other people who had gotten my name from friends at the event. I went out and bought a brand new ledger book with a dark blue cover. I opened it to the first clean page. I started writing down names, dates, deposits. It was 3 full days before David finally worked up the courage to call. His voice was small, apologetic, defeated. "Hello, David," I said calmly. "So, that was quite a night." "Yes," I said simply. "Certainly was. I'm very pleased with how it turned out. The magazine article was wonderful exposure for the business." "Yeah, I saw that article online. That's really great, Mom. Really impressive. We had no idea you were doing all that." "I know you didn't," I said. An awkward, agonizing silence stretched out between us. I did not fill it or try to make it comfortable. It was his responsibility to fill. He was the one who wanted something from me. "Listen, Mom. About Christmas." I waited silently. "I know you said you were too busy, but that was before all the success happened. I mean, you did it. You proved your point to everyone. So, can we just come over like usual, please? Jessica, she really misses you." The lie was so obvious, so pathetic and transparent, it was almost funny. "She misses me." "David," I said, my voice kind but as firm as steel, "you're completely misunderstanding the situation here. The charity gala was not the point of all this. The gala was an advertisement for my business. Margaret's Kitchen is now my full-time job. I am booked completely solid for the next 2 months." "Booked? What do you mean booked solid?" "I mean, David, that on Christmas Eve, I am catering the Chen family's annual holiday party for 60 guests. They are paying me more for that single night than you and Jessica probably spent on your entire ski trip to Vail." He was absolutely stunned into silence. You're working on Christmas Eve. And Christmas Day," I added matter-of-factly. "I have a standing order for a corporate holiday brunch on Christmas morning. I'm afraid you and Jessica will have to handle your own holiday plans from now on. This is my career now." He didn't have any response ready. The entire foundation of his adult life, that Mom's house was a free hotel, that Mom's food was a guaranteed benefit he could count on, had crumbled into dust. He was facing the direct consequence of his own weakness and choices. "Oh," he said quietly, just simply. "Oh, I have to go now, dear. I have a menu tasting appointment with a client in 30 minutes. I'll talk to you sometime in the new year. Take care." Hung up the phone. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was the hollow realization that the door was closed and locked. The free ride was completely over. And it was entirely, completely their own fault. I heard much later, through a cousin who still talked to them, about their Christmas disaster. Jessica, in a desperate attempt to save face and prove she could do it, had tried to host Christmas dinner herself in their small apartment. She had never cooked a turkey in her entire life. It was, my cousin reported with barely hidden amusement, an absolute disaster. The turkey was dry. Bone dry. Dry as cardboard, in fact. The justice and irony of it all tasted better than any dessert I had ever created. My kitchen looks completely different now. It's been 6 months since that charity gala. The old linoleum floor is gone, replaced with warm, practical tile. The counters are new, a clean marble surface. I took the first 6 paychecks from my catering jobs, And I didn't buy a single thing for anyone else. I reinvested every penny in myself and my business. I have a brand new professional double oven. My grandmother's old cast iron pan still hangs in its place of honor on the wall. It is the only old thing I kept. It is a reminder of where I came from. My house is still my sanctuary, but it's no longer a quiet, lonely place. It's a place of purpose and productivity. 4 days a week, it smells of baking bread, of chocolate melting, of fresh lemons. I hired a young culinary school student to help me with prep work and deliveries twice a week. I'm a boss now. I sign paychecks. I approve invoices. I am Ms. Thompson to my clients. Chef Margaret to my assistant. I am 68 years old, and I have never in my entire life felt more powerful or more alive. I hear from David occasionally now. The phone calls are strained and awkward. He calls on my birthday, on major holidays. He asks carefully, "How are you, Mom?" But what he really means is, "Have you changed your mind yet? Can we come back to how things were?" He and Jessica are still together. They are fine, I suppose. They are living the life they chose. A life of filtered photos and online validation and shallow relationships. They do not have a key to my house anymore. Change the locks. I am polite when we talk. I am kind. I am distant. I am a very, very busy woman with a business to run. I am sitting on my back porch right now, looking out at the garden I planted last month. It's late spring. The sun is wonderfully warm on my face, and I am drinking my afternoon tea. I am at peace. A peace I didn't just stumble into or find by accident, but a peace I built with my own 2 hands, a peace I earned. I think back sometimes to that Thanksgiving dinner. I think about the humiliation I felt, the cardboard comment, the pathetic sad old woman I was made to feel like. I realize now that Jessica was never my real enemy. She was just a catalyst, a trigger. She was a symptom of a disease I had allowed to grow inside me for many, many years. The disease of staying silent to keep the peace. The disease of shrinking myself smaller and smaller so others could feel bigger and more important. I had let them mistake my patience for weakness. I had let them mistake my kindness for stupidity. The lesson I served that night at the gala wasn't really for Jessica's benefit. She's completely incapable of learning it or changing. The lesson was for me. I learned that my skills and experience were not just a hobby I did for fun. They were a currency. They had real value. My experience and knowledge were not old and outdated. They were valuable and timeless. And my dignity, my self-respect, was not something I could ever let someone else control or negotiate. I look at my hands now, the same hands that served them, that cleaned up after them, that cooked for them for years. They're the same hands that now build my new life every single day. I look up as if I'm speaking to you, my dear friend listening to this. Never let anyone make you feel small in your own home. Never let anyone devalue the work of your hands or the wisdom you carry in your heart. And here's the most important lesson I learned. When someone shows you clearly that they do not respect what you bring to the table, stop serving them. Walk away. Today, my peace is my greatest treasure, and my freedom is the sweetest thing I've ever tasted. This community we're building right here on Granny's Voice is a place for stories exactly like this one. Every time you like this video, share it, or subscribe to the channel, you're helping someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves and light their own fire. Thank you so much for listening to my story today, and please help this community of strong, courageous voices continue to grow.